I am privileged to talk at this time after several distinguished speakers this morning. They set the stage for me, and I am really pleased to speak at this time. When it comes to OPEC, and here is the outline, I'm going to talk about, answer some questions about is OPEC a cartel, and then I'm going to talk about our outlook, NGP outlook. By the way, NGP is a private equity firm. We manage about $9 billion in money. All of it is in energy, and we have a new fund, Fund 10, which is a $4 billion fund above the 9. So I'm going to go over our outlook. We do produce oil outlook, natural gas outlook, and LNG outlook in addition to the economic outlook. Speaking of OPEC, you already have that handout, so most of the stuff that I'm going to skip basically is in the handout, and it answers most of the questions that people have about the behavior of OPEC. A couple of days ago, just before I came in, I was on to Tulsa. I was on the road, and I decided to sort out how many articles I've written about OPEC, how many research papers and reports, etc., and they exceeded 300. Yet I did not make it to Hill's list on the presentation. But I've done a lot of work on modeling OPEC and the world oil market. I'm going to mention some of the models and some of their problems. Let's start with OPEC. Is OPEC a cartel? Here is the problem in the literature. When we talk about economic modeling of OPEC, in the last 40 years, most of it, if not all of it, is flawed, period. And everything we've seen in academic journals, in books, etc., is flawed, and there are several reasons for that. Most of those models, again, I'm talking about the econometric models here. Most of those models are single equation models. And just to give you an idea what single equations models do, they are studying correlations, and correlations mean nothing. Those people basically run the correlations, and they said, see, those countries coordinate production with each other. Here are some results for you. You take the same model and apply it to the wheat market, and the wheat market in the world ends up a perfect cartel. Apply it to any agricultural product, and every agricultural market is a cartel. Apply it to any commodity, and any commodity will end up more monopolized than oil. Apply it to OPEC, and you end up with OPEC, the most powerful is in 1985, 1986. Apply it to non-OPEC, and non-OPEC is a more powerful cartel than OPEC. What that tells you about the models. So we have a serious problem with those models. But we do have even more problems than that. Think about it this way. In the demand equations, and we've seen the elasticities today. I can tell you all the elasticities that are coming out of the econometric models of OPEC, and I want to specify here, out of OPEC models, all of them are flawed. And here is one of the reasons. You have to use a price in your demand equation. You have to use a price in the supply equation, and those prices have to be real prices. And to get real prices, you need some sort of deflator. So they talk about the behavior of Saudi Arabia, yet they use the US deflator, the US GDP deflator for Saudi Arabia. That does not make sense. And I can go on and on and on to explain all kinds of problems with those models. So the single equation models basically are not acceptable, and all the results in the literature, all the economic results that concluded OPEC is a cartel suffer from those problems. The conclusion of my work, after 20 years of work, is that OPEC is not a cartel, period. OPEC at 50. You have to be strong to survive. But OPEC survived until 50 because it is weak. It's weakness what made it survive. Because if it was strong and very strong, it would have collapsed a long time ago. Here are some of the characteristics of cartels in the literature. A cartel has to have those characteristics to be labeled as a cartel. Now, to judge any model on OPEC or the oil market, we have to have three conditions. First, we have to have a theory. Then we have to have a data to back up the theory. And then statistical analysis have to back up that too. If the theory and the data, if there is no theory, because what we've seen in the literature in the last 10 years is that some people just getting the data, running away with the data, but there is no theory behind even the explanation. You have to have a theory. So you have to have a theory, then you have to have a data and statistical analysis. And once statistical analysis support the theory, then we start talking. But just running away with data is not going to solve the problem. So in theory, to have a cartel, we have to have those 6 conditions. Now let's look at them and see which one of them fits OPEC. A cartel divides the market and adopt a quota system. Well, OPEC was established in 1960. It did not adopt a quota system until 1982. So supposedly the power peak of OPEC in the 70s, when OPEC basically controlled the market, supposedly, it has no quota at that time. So how it controlled the market without quota? But after 1982, what happened? The market collapsed. Create monitoring system to identify quota violators. OPEC has a monitoring committee, but it's different from any other cartel that we've known. It's a very weak monitoring, and it only happens when someone complains or there are some suspicious activities. Punish cheaters, this has never happened. Even there are a couple of papers in the literature talk about how Saudis basically punished everyone else when they flooded the market in 1986, but that was a Saudi behavior. It wasn't the organization policy. Ensure that the cartel has authority over production and decisions of production. This never happened. All OPEC members control their own production, not OPEC. Have cash and buffer stocks to support price band. That's not the case. Have large market share to be able to influence the market. We heard today, the largest market share was 50% and only for a few months. After that, it's basically 35 to 44%. For a market share based on US court, and I know there are several lawyers here, you need to have 80 or above. We have a case of 85%. Most of the cases are above 93%, basically to be subject to US law. So 40% will get you nowhere. So again, I don't want to go through the details. There is a whole paper in that packet that discusses all of these issues. Again, OPEC is different from any other commodity organizations, and in those papers, basically, I compared OPEC to various organizations and showed that it is the weakest. OPEC is different from the Seven Sisters. As you heard today, the Seven Sisters controlled the whole market from the well all the way to the gas station. OPEC does not control that. OPEC is different from the Texas Railroad Commission, and there are some discussion of that too. Again, I'm trying to save time here, so I'm just skipping over those since everything is written in the packet. If you look at, again, those models, we do have serious theoretical and empirical mistakes in the literature, serious problems with the single equation models. Here is one for you. For those who are interested in OPEC behavior, all you get to do is do an elasticity test. One of the main conditions in the literature for anyone to have a market power is to have an elasticity larger than 1. A cartel or a monopolist have to operate on the elastic, again, on the elastic part of its demand curve. If it doesn't operate on the elastic part of its demand curve, then it cannot dominate the market. And when you run the test on all OPEC members and on every oil producer in the world, only Saudi Arabia passed that test. When you run all the cartel tests, basically, only Saudi Arabia passed that test. So the conclusion is OPEC is not a cartel. The market is dominated by Saudi Arabia as long as Saudi Arabia has spare capacity. That's the bottom line of all this research, that Saudi Arabia fits the theory, the data fits, and the statistical tests fit. And so OPEC is not a cartel, and just want to remind you of the statement, if it doesn't fit, you must acquit. And they won too. All right. when we do our outlook, basically, we focus on market fundamentals. We don't look at geopolitical events, and we don't model natural events, etc. So I'm going to go over the fundamentals. But before we do that, since we heard this morning about various explanations for the increase in oil prices, I'm going to provide my own explanation for the increase in prices. So why did oil prices increase from 2004 to the first half of 2008? If you look at this chart shows oil prices since 1988, and it shows the forward curve as of last Friday. If you go back in history, even if we take this chart back to the 50s, what we see? We see the following. Every major spike in oil prices was caused by a major political event. 1956, 1967, 1973, 1979, 1980. And then you go all the way here to 1990. You see a spike. Then you see other spike here. This is UN problems with Iraq, etc. And then another set of problems with Iraq. And then here is the Iraq invasion. But there is something very unique here. If you go back, skip those years and go back here, this is the recent turmoil. The question then is this. What, if we have no political events here, how can you explain this area here? And if we have no political events, how do you explain a doubling of prices from 35 to 70 during a recession? In fact, here is something else for you. We have problems throughout the Middle East. We lost all the Libyan oil. There are demonstrations in the largest oil-producing country in the world. We lost the Gulf of Mexico, or the oil in the Gulf of Mexico. There was a moratorium, and it still is very difficult even to drill, to have a license for a new site. We have all those problems, yet prices are around 100. The argument here seems like price is still low, given all the disasters that we have around the world. But again, let's go back here. How can we explain this increase between 2004 and 2008? Is it speculation? Do you think speculators are going to hold contracts for years? In fact, this period is very unique in history, because this is the only time where we have a combination of 9 factors that coalesce together to increase oil prices and prevent the increase in oil prices from affecting economic growth. We have increase in oil prices, increase in economic growth, increase in government spending, increase in military spending, increase in incomes, increase in consumption. While the dollar was going down, interest rates were going down, and taxes were going down. This combination of events never happened in history. In fact, the increase in US government consumption between 2001 and the beginning of 2007 is 183 times the increase in oil prices. 183 times. If you look at American income between 1980 and 2007, despite all the increase in prices, American income still buy more oil than before. So it was those factors, those fundamental factors in the market that played the big role in this one. Then we have the financial crisis and the recession. Prices collapsed. That's fundamental. Then went up again, doubled. Why they doubled? I'm going to explain to you why they doubled. Because OPEC exports went down. What I'm going to show you here is the following. The reason for the increase in prices between 2004 and 2008 is just pure market fundamentals. I'm going to show you how supply was flat, demand was going up, there was a gap between supply and demand, and the only way to meet that gap is to use the spare capacity of OPEC, and once that spare capacity vanished, prices skyrocketed. Speculators in the market saw the same pictures that I'm going to show you, and they saw an opportunity to make money. Demand was going up. Here is the demand going up. We've seen the impact of high prices, so this is becoming almost flat here, but we've seen an increase over the years. Here is the supply. Here is non-OPEC again, and this is until June 2008.